Okay, everybody, we have reached the top of the hour, so let's get going with today's L10 webinar, 4 Ways to Keep Your Sales Teams Market Ready and Your Budget Healthy, sponsored by CMR Institute. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for L10. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to serve as the host of our webinar. I'm going to start here with a few housekeeping items, including most importantly how you can interact with our speakers today. We are planning a 60-minute session for you today. You'll notice your phones are on mute, so if you have any questions or comments along the way, I would encourage you to use the questions module on that control panel there on the right side of your screen. You can just type in the question, hit the submit button, and we'll queue up the questions for the appropriate time or for the Q&A session in today's webinar. And I would always urge you to use that feature throughout today's webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please do enter them along the way while they're fresh in your mind. Also on the control panel, I wanted to point out the handouts window. There's a handouts window there with a few items you might wish to download, including a copy of today's presentation slides. And there's also a worksheet there from CMR Institute and some information from L10 on our 2017 certificate programs and our e-learning lounge, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about later on in today's program. To download those items, you can just highlight the title and it will walk you through the process to download to your preferred location on your desktop. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be archived for future reference to the L-10.org website. We're also going to send you a follow-up email about 1 hour after today's webinar, connecting you to the recording as well. And speaking of following up, as you leave today's webinar, a short survey is going to pop up on a separate browser window. I would ask you to please take a moment when you leave today's webinar to look for that survey and share your thoughts with us on today's program. We produce these programs for you, so of course your feedback is always important and appreciated. And along those lines, my email address is showing here on the screen, and I'll share it again later in today's program. If I can help you with anything before, during, or after any of our webinars, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. All right, with all of that said, I'm going to tell you quickly about our presenters, and I'm going to turn things over to our moderator today, Michelle O'Connor, and she'll tell you a little bit more about their presenters. You're going to hear today from Denise Folawan at Alamo Pharma Services, Jeff Taylor at Ipsen, and of course Michelle O'Connor with CMR Institute. So let me turn things over to Michelle at this point, and she'll take it from here, tell you more about the presenters, and get us started. Michelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for that introduction. Welcome to our webinar, everybody. Today we are hosting a dynamic panel discussion highlighting 4 ways to keep your sales teams market ready and your budget healthy. Now I'd like to welcome our expert panelists today. First, let me introduce Denise Folawan. Denise is Executive Director of Training and Development at Alamo Pharma Services, where she leads the development, delivery, and management of customized training programs. She is also a member of L10. Dee, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Michelle. I look forward to the discussion today.
Okay, next I'd like to introduce Jeff Taylor. Jeff is Senior Director of Training and Development at Ipsen, where he leads initiatives that often leverage group and team learning. He is also a member of L10. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for the compliment. I'm dynamic and I'm an expert today, so I'm very excited about that.
Yes, that's right.
Wait till I tell my wife.
That's right. And I'm Michelle O'Connor, and I'm President and CEO of CMR Institute, and I'll be your moderator today. So let's move right on to our learning objectives and what we hope to accomplish today. So first of all, we're going to identify strategies to cost-effectively maintain up-to-date and relevant content in a rapidly changing environment. We're going to look at new approaches to developing role-based training using blended learning methodologies and new technology. And then finally, we'll learn how to incorporate learner preferences and styles into a training strategy that maximizes your ROI, which we know is important to everyone. So I'd like to start out by asking the audience a quick question. What do you see as your biggest training challenge in 2017? Choose A if you think offering more training for the same or less dollars. Pick B if you believe it is keeping up with a changing marketplace. Pick C if you think it is accommodating learner preferences. And pick D if you believe it is ensuring timely delivery of content. Please make your selection now, and then we'll get started.
Michelle, I apologize. This is Tim. We had a little bit of problem with the poll, and that one did not work properly. I apologize for that. What I could ask is if folks, if you could go to that questions window and type in A, B, C, or D, that'd be great if you don't mind doing the poll in old school, so to speak. And the results are coming in. And again, the answers are, your options are A, for offering more training for the same or less dollars, B, for keeping up with the changing marketplace, C, for accommodating learner preferences, or D, ensuring timely delivery of content. I'm
Okay.
seeing some interesting answers come in, Michelle. We've got, I'm seeing a few A's, a couple of B's, one D, and 2 people have said all of the above.
Okay. All right. Okay. So lots of training challenges. So let's start out by talking about some of the challenges that many in our audience are facing today. So we know that for many of you, your customers' needs are shifting, and you've been asked to provide training that is continually updated and relevant to a variety of field roles. Maybe some of you have even been asked to do more this year with the same or a smaller budget. So I'd like to ask our panel what concerns they may have about keeping their content current, given all the changes that we may see this coming year. Let me start with Jeff. Jeff, what is the biggest challenge you're facing when it comes to keeping your teams market ready over the next 12 months?
Well, I think the 2 big challenges are, the first one is just training time and time resources. That's a big challenge just because it gets pushed around by the business needs and things like that. So that's always an issue, and of course leveraging some of the technologies that we're using now help with that. And then I guess the other big challenge is how fast the marketplace is changing. So I'm in an oncology space. About 2/3 of my sales teams are oncology, and both the marketplace for that, the business marketplace changes very fast, and so does the clinical marketplace. And keeping up with both of those is certainly a challenge.
Absolutely. Dee, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. So in my world, we have a lot of generics, and that can become extremely frustrating, you guys know, for the representatives. So it's really about, kind of changing that mindset for those reps and trying to figure ways that we can kind of control, the controllable. So what we've tried to do is really take a look at, the business outcomes and trying to make our representatives more of business managers, and really being able to provide that value when they're going into the offices and trying to educate, not only, the customer, the doctor, but that office staff, and really trying to provide solutions on how to deal with pharmacy and patient callbacks. So that's an area that we've been working diligently on and trying to come up with some new ways to do that in a cost-effective manner. And actually one of the ways that we have done it would be through CMR, because our budgets are fairly tight, because we're a really small organization, and we've been able to use a lot of their resources and e-learning modules that are off the shelf, and then try to customize those on our own. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dee. Okay, so before we discuss the first strategy, let's ask the audience another question. So we'd like to know, how often do you update your training resources to reflect market changes? So pick A if you update your resources once a year, and pick B if you update your resources every 2 or 3 years. Pick C if you update as often as the market changes, and pick D if you are not currently updating your resources. And finally, pick E if you're not sure how often you update your resources. So please make your selection, and then we'll discuss the results. Should be interesting. Lots to keep up with these days.
Well, thank you, Michelle.
Okay,
people are voting very quickly. I'm going to ask everyone to wrap up their votes here in the next few seconds, and then we'll share the results. I will tell you there's a leading answer emerging, but I won't tell you which one it is. Great, everybody. Thanks for sharing with us on the poll. Let me go ahead and close off the polling tool here, and then Michelle will look at the results. And here you go.
Okay. Okay, interesting. All right, well, good. It looks like the majority of the audience is doing a good job of keeping up with the market changes, so that's great. That's very, very important. So let's move on and talk about some of the strategies that trainers can use to overcome these challenges and still create dynamic learning programs around the changing marketplace. We believe this requires a four-pronged approach in which trainers should choose a content development strategy that accommodates frequent updates but keeps costs predictable, embraces a role-based training approach, adapt training to learner preferences and style. That's really important. We're going to talk more about that. And then review key metrics to determine how you're going to measure the ROI of your training. So during this hour, we're going to talk about each step in more detail and some of the ways that the panelists are addressing each step of this approach. Okay, so Dee, can you talk about how you approach content development at your company in a way that allows you to make frequent updates in a cost-effective manner?
Sure. So what we often do is we'll take a look at where our skill sets are with our representatives first, and we'll often do that through surveys and assessments with the representatives and then our district managers and senior leaders. This way we're targeting what the reps really need out there in the field. And then secondly, we'll work with our partners, and we look for partners that we know we can have strong long-term relationships with and that really understand our business. And we'll begin to kind of develop that straw man out with our partners on the skill sets and competencies that we're looking for. Then we'll move into really those application exercises, and as Michelle mentioned earlier, we'll talk more about this, but being able to kind of engage everybody by their learning style so that everybody has a good understanding of the content, they understand how to kind of go out in the field and then execute on that. And then really important, because we can do all this training and spend our budget on it, but are we really pulling it through? So how do we do that? So we've found that the coaching guides have been extremely beneficial for us out in the field. And what we'll do is we'll train our managers on the coaching guides, and then they'll pull that through when they're on their field rides. And it really builds a good partnership with the representative and the district manager to talk about areas that they can develop, and improve upon, and areas that they're doing great in, and maybe they can share that understanding. And then what we'll do is we'll pull the loop through final with some additional surveys and advisory council to make sure that all the work that we did and the learnings we were beneficial to the field. And then what we'll also do is kind of look at our the different roles of each individual and what their competencies are to ensure that when we're building those learning plans, they're really specific to what that person does on the job.
Okay, great. Well, let's look at other ways that we've best practices for keeping your content updated. So we mentioned that trainers have limited resources to develop their training, and they're typically focused on company-specific training needs. So I think that we all know that that's one of the best ways that to keep customer-facing sales teams competent and credible with their customers. The other thing I wanted to mention was the use of a subscription or membership model for off-the-shelf content. I think that that's another way you can manage your budget while also ensuring that roles have access to information they need throughout the year. For example, we create customized learning plans for various roles so that it's possible to deliver access to very specific content depending on what role you have in the organization, all under the same subscription. And then finally, I would say that another best practice is to utilize newer technology tools like SCORM Cloud to store and deliver content that allows your vendor partner to update and push out content updates seamlessly to your learners. And one of the examples that that we've had most recently is our content on Macra. That has changed numerous times since we launched that program due to legislative and CMS-driven changes. So we make these updates within 5 business days and then push them out to our clients and the learners so that access is pretty immediate. So, so those are some best practices that I would share, and I was hoping that we could move on to Jeff, and talk about the strategies that you've employed to create a dynamic training program around the changing market.
Yeah, so thank you, Michelle. This model that you have here on the screen is the primary model that we've used at Ipsen for the last 3 years to keep our costs down and stay flexible. I try to leverage as much off-the-shelf content as I can for my training programs, especially my new hire programs, and not having someone else keep those up to date saves so much money and time for me that I couldn't do it without this sort of approach. And then, of course, the membership subscription is also very important. That again, you're updating the content and pushing that content out to people as it becomes updated. And SCORM, I don't know where I'd be without the SCORM Cloud. Almost all of our home study and e-learning is actually PowerPoint based, all right, and then it's converted into a SCORM compliant framework. We use Brainshark to do that, and updating the PowerPoint portion of that when I have changes is very simple and very easy. And by using the cloud, I only need to update the SCORM on my creation site, and that links to my LMS. So I use this model extensively, and without it, I wouldn't have the money or the time to run a current training program.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. And then I was hoping that you could also speak to cross-functional training at Ipsen. Can you give us your thoughts on how you utilize role-based training and cross-training at Ipsen?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we try to leverage different roles to train other roles. So our account managers play a big role in training our field sales teams in terms of our account planning and our account approach. In fact, our field sales teams and our account managers are required to have a single account plan for every account that they have that's a joint account. And by having our account managers, you'll lead the training and then the execution of those account plans. We get great cross-functional teamwork there, and it cuts down on a lot of the overlap that you might have if people had overlapping or competing account plans. So that's probably our biggest strategy, is leveraging other departments to train other departments and keep people current and cross-functional at the same time.
That's a great and probably more cost-effective way to keep them trained as well, I would guess.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the second strategy. Dee, unless you had anything to add there?
No,
Okay.
no, I think that was great. Thanks.
Okay, so once trainers have developed a content development strategy that allows them to make frequent updates and stay on budget, the next strategy is to embrace a role-based training approach. And that approach should leverage blended learning methods and new technologies, as we mentioned earlier. So role-based training really allows the training to be customized for the different customer-facing roles within an organization. And a content development strategy that utilizes this approach, it may have a group of core competencies or capabilities that are the same across multiple roles. For example, business acumen or drive for results. So while some of the content may be available across all those roles, like the changing market, some roles require more in-depth training than others. So using risk contracting as an example, CAMs or other leaders on managed market teams may need an in-depth understanding of how risk contracting is being used in population health initiatives or as a way to share risk among a certain population of people or disease state. And the sales rep or manager may only need to understand the basic concept or even what it is. And so I think that's an important distinction there. And then role-based training also allows the delivery methodology and time allocation to be customized by role. And we find that this is really important for customers because they may, for example, their sales reps or managers may need a really deep understanding of a particular concept that may benefit more from face-to-face training or coaching accompanied by e-modules or simulations, while CAMs may benefit the most from short podcast or webinars that might feature, for example, a healthcare executive discussing attributes they look for in a partnership. So this role-based approach can be really cost-effective because it allows trainers to tap into core content and then tailor into the roles as needed. So Jeff, Dee, any comments on that from either of you?
Well, Michelle, you hit on some core points here. Being able to target the training by role, which CMR has done wonderfully with a lot of their content, and I certainly applaud you guys for that. But also, the way in which it's delivered, it's short, right? It's to the point. It's easily updated, and I think being able to chunk the learning in a way that people don't feel intimidated by the amount of time it's going to take, to systematically approach their development is very, very important.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Dee, can you talk about how you apply role-based training at your company? In other words, how do you ensure that different field teams receive appropriate content for their respective roles?
Sure. So the first thing we really do is kind of develop that roadmap, to your point, where we're looking at the role base. So there are a lot of different roles within the organization. So we'll have, for example, our sales representatives, those that are more seasoned, that have been around a little bit longer, versus some of our newer folks that may be more business to business and are just getting into pharma. So, those roles are going to look a little bit different in the content that we want to push out to them. Also, we have our leadership development programs, the 101 and 201 program, our regional sales trainer program, and then our account managers. So, when you look at these different types of roles, market is going to be consistent, obviously, across the board for them, but there'll be other areas where we're going to want to really focus in on what, are those skills and competencies for that specific role, and then also start to think a little bit about, what are some of the behaviors that we may want to continue to instill in that role, and then maybe what are some of those behaviors that we need to change, right, because the market's changing. So what are some of the newer things we need to make sure that our teams are, ready and savvy and able to have good, not only clinical conversations, but industry conversations, what's going on in the industry. So we'll look at that, and then we'll work with our partners and develop, the off-shelf. We'll look at the off-the-shelf kind of content, and then develop our coaching guides from that. And that truly really does keep the cost down. Instead of, reinventing it and building it out yourself, just tapping into like the CMR coursework. To Michelle's point and Jeff's point earlier, the content is updated on a regular basis, which is super for us. And then you can just kind of go in and assign it to your groups and then pull it through out in the field. So that's been extremely helpful for us as we look at our roadmaps for the role-based training.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dee. Jeff, how do you segment training by role, and why do you think that's important for keeping learners engaged?
Well, it's obviously, the obvious is that you have to provide training that's relevant to a person's roles and responsibility in their job. That's the core of adult learning. Is people will engage in learning when they see it's a benefit to them and not for somebody else. And I think this is where stakeholder management really comes into play. And our stakeholders will tell us what they need if we take the opportunity to either listen or to either pursue that more formally. But all of the continuous learning programs that we ran at Ipsen last year, all of those came out as stated needs by our stakeholders, and those stated needs were either formal or informal. So formal through surveys, or informal simply by attending our business meetings and listening for the issues they were facing, and how training can actually help solve, or at least help be a bridge to solving those issues. So I think stakeholder management is key, and of course getting their buy-in before the training goes out is very important. But they will tell you what they need if you simply listen and you kind of read between the lines of some of what they're saying as well.
I think that's a great point, Jeff. That oftentimes that's the best way to get that buy-in is to listen and respond. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's move on to the third strategy for keeping your sales teams market ready. Adapting training to learning preferences and styles. So we've talked a little bit about the role-based, but let's get into the different styles and start with visual learners. So as most of you are aware, visual learners prefer to see information and visualize the relationship between ideas. So some tips for those types of learners are to use charts and graphs, make presentations highly visible, show the relationship between points, for example. And then auditory learners prefer to hear or see rather than read. So in this case, the use of audio narration of content for key concepts. So for example, using podcast videos, that type of thing. And I think then in face-to-face training, another strategy for auditory is to ask questions that give participants the opportunity to repeat back key points so that they're hearing that. And then kinesthetic or active learners, hands-on, they learn best by doing, as we all know. So some strategies there are, using role plays or simulations to demonstrate key points. Have them write down key points to remember, or have them complete exercises like planning tools, for example. And then finally, social learners, they learn from others and build in coaching, small group activities to the training. I think is a really effective strategy. And learners can be a combination of any of or all of these styles, but I think most have a preference for one over the other. And I'd like to hear from Dia or Jeff in terms of how you adapt different learning styles, maybe within the training that you do at your respective organizations.
Sure. So at Alamo, what we do is, we look at the different areas, like we had said, in these role-based positions. So, the training's going to look very different if you're doing this for like a sales representative versus, say, for example, you're running a training for the corporate group in manufacturing, or folks that are, at the plant. So it's really important to kind of know the audience. And to Jeff's point earlier, really getting that buy-in from your stakeholders. And I really think that's where you need to start. You need to explain to them and talk with them and discuss kind of, what's the training you're looking at? Why do you think we need this training, first of all, right? Because it's time out of the field, it's budget, and kind of building that case of, what the importance of the training is. And using the surveys and advisory councils to get feedback from, whether it's the reps or people at the plant or manufacturing, that can help build the case of, what do we need? What kind of skills do we need to develop? And then from there, you need to be able to focus in really on the different learning styles. And, what's really interesting now is our, millennials that are out there. And that learning may look a little bit different than maybe somebody that's a little more seasoned that's out in the field. So really being able to adjust the content within your course so that everyone can stay engaged throughout the entire workshop. And then really chunking that out, right? Because time in the field is important. So kind of using those little micro-learning bursts, whether it's, an e-learning, a short e-learning that you're doing, and trying to pull that through, or if it's a skill that you're going to, try to develop in the field, and you give the manager, that coaching guide or those key points to do out in the field for application. And then the other area which would really tie into that is any type of maybe like recognition programs that you could do along with that. So as you're kind of building out, that training and thinking about the different learning styles as people move through those, some people like to, be recognized. So how can you go about doing that within your programs? Jeff, did you want to add to that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I reflect back on when I first got into training, and about 14 years ago, I became the director of training for cardiovascular medicine at Sanofi. And I remember people coming into our classes after 2 or 3 weeks of home study, and we would start our first session on anatomy and physiology, and honestly, it looked like they'd never heard it before, even though they just spent 2 weeks of home study reviewing it. And I came to learn very quickly that unless people have a variety of methods to learn the same thing, and unless we're combining some of the learning preferences like audio, visual, physical, verbal, all those things, unless we're doing all those around a single element, we're really not accelerating the learning like we need to. And so all of our training here at Ipsen, especially in the home study environment, we try to incorporate at least 3 different learning styles for every piece of information we want the people to learn. We want our learners to incorporate. And we leverage the virtual classroom quite a bit in home study. And I have found that unless people talk about what they're learning before they come into live training, that they really don't understand it as well, or they really don't internalize it like I would like. And so we leverage a lot of different learning preferences around a single, learning initiative. And, you can't design learning to meet all styles all the time, but you can combine a number of styles around any single particular part of learning to help drive learner retention.
Okay, that's great. You both made some excellent points. I want to circle back to something that you mentioned, Dee, in terms of the millennials. Have you found that there are specific strategies that you've found to be successful in addressing specific learner needs with that age group?
Yeah, actually, and it kind of builds upon what Jeff was saying about these virtual trainings. We do a lot of virtual trainings. We used Adobe Connect, but there's a lot of different programs out there that you can utilize. And within that, you can do this polling. You can do the actual breakout classroom sessions, and they seem to enjoy that, right? Because it's about the representatives teaching each other versus Dee standing there going through content. So we're really learning from each other through those virtual sessions, so that, like Jeff said, once they come in for a live, real classroom training, we've covered a lot of the basics. We've learned a lot already that now we can really start to apply the skills. How are we going to use these out in the field? So definitely through the virtual trainings. And I think there's a lot of things out there now, and Jeff, you could probably add to this too, just more of like the gaming type things that you can do in your learning versus reading a PDF module on disease state. So trying to build in more interactive activities within the home study, that seems to work really well also.
Okay, great. Some great tips there. Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree with Dee. I mean, I don't have a lot of millennials in my sales forces. We have very tenured sales teams, but I still find some of the concepts that we think of millennial style training that people enjoy no matter what their age. And that's chunking the content, right? I mean, it's keeping it shorter. I mean, everyone loves to see a 35-minute e-learning module, not a 90-minute e-learning module. And people love to talk about what they're learning. And so, and I don't care if they've been in the sales force 25 years or 25 months. If we get people online talking about their learning experience, it just goes a lot further into helping them retain that. We have not done a whole lot with the gaming side of things at my company just yet. I'm still looking for a way to do that easily. All right. So, I mean, gaming I see the great benefit in that, but I haven't found a solution that's easy to implement and easy to manage and easy to maintain. There's a few online things like Quizlet. If you guys have ever done Quizlet online, is almost a free gaming site, right? You can set up, but it still has its challenges about deploying that in a commercial setting. So we're still working on that part of it here at Ipsen in terms of the gaming.
Yeah,
Okay.
and one thing that we did that was really cost effective, and I know, Jeff, in oncology you guys have seasoned reps, but like for some of the newer folks that maybe come in, or even just as a refresher if they've been out there for a long time, we did like the avatar, using those like avatar games, and that was easy to build out, and it's good for just, like you said, quick learning, quick refreshers, or if you're trying to just push out some new content easily, that's another approach that you can kind of think about using as well.
Okay, great tips. Thank you. Okay, so before we move on to the third strategy for keeping your teams market ready and staying on budget, let's ask another question for the audience. What kind of training is being requested most by your field sales teams? So pick A if your sales teams want training on new decision makers and call points. Pick B if your sales teams want training on current treatment practices. Pick C if your sales teams are looking for more training on selling strategies. And pick D if your sales teams are looking for more training on healthcare reform and new payment models. So please make your selection now, and then we'll discuss the results. This could be interesting. Okay, Tim, are there responses coming in? Tim, are we seeing some responses?
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was speaking on mute. Rookie mistake. Yes, it looks like about half the people in the room have voted. A little bit more now. I'm going to ask everyone to wrap up their voting here in the next couple of seconds, and then we'll share the results. While people are finishing up voting, Michelle, we have a question from the audience. You guys mentioned a free gaming site. Could you say that name again?
Oh, I don't know if you call it a gaming site or not. I think it's called Quizlet. A lot of the high schools and middle schools use it, but it's a great online resource that you can create, flashcards. You can create games, pretty simple games, where if you upload an audience, if you have a user database that you upload to it, which would be your sales professionals, they can compete against each other in some of the games. It's really a neat site, and I know my kids use it. I've used it a couple of times commercially, but it's one of those areas that requires a little bit of attention, to keep it running and keep it current. So.
Yeah, we actually use that too. It is a really good tool, Jeff. I'm glad you brought that up. And also another one too that you can look into, and it's free, is Kahoots. We use that one a lot in our classroom training, and we use it more as a check-in and competition. So as we're building out, the week, we'll add in, quiz questions from the content from the day before. And then it's real easy to access. You just, type in the questions that you have, multiple choice, true and false, and then the teams do it right on their phones, their iPhones or their iPads. They just log right in, and it builds nice competition because we all know sales reps like to be competitive, and then we kind of tally that up through the week. So those are two, Quizlet and Kahoots. Those are two free ones that definitely are worth looking into. And then there's also Turning Point too, that's been around quite some time as well, where that does the same thing, but that would be a fee.
You know, and I'll make one more comment about Quizlet. It's a great, that style of learning is really great for that lower level of learning, that recall and recognition and defining level of learning. And I've always felt that if people understood what they were reading before they read it, i.e. the, start with the glossary. If I could start with something that really treaded the glossary before they started their learning, they'd be way better off. And we have leveraged Quizlet for that environment to help people understand and define the terms that are going to be new to them in their studying.
Okay, great tips. Thank you both for
Yeah,
sharing
very
that.
good. Thanks, Jeff and Dee. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Well, it looks like the voting is in.
Tim, I'm sorry,
go
I
ahead.
don't see the slides. I don't see the slides anymore.
I still see them.
You do?
You might have lost your connection, perhaps, Dee. Sorry about that. Hopefully they'll come back here after the poll is over. It looks like everybody has voted, so let me go ahead and close off the polling. And Michelle, here are the results.
Okay. All right. Selling strategies. Okay. So that's the top area and not surprising. So, all right. Dee, can you talk about the request you're hearing from the field regarding their learning priorities for the next 12 months?
Yeah, and this was a great poll to kind of lead into it. What we find exactly is the selling strategies, and it's strategies around market more than the traditional selling process. So what we've done with our selling program is all the programs are fairly similar that are out there. We've taken a closer look at in our classroom training. Looking at kind of like the data that the representative is seeing in their analytics tool, whichever tool it may be, whether it's Viva, CAX, whatever that tool may be, and then really understanding the profile and market of that specific customer, and then building the selling messages around that, so that we're really creating more value and more of a interest and demand on what do we want to make sure that we uncover and learn about that specific practice. And once we do that, what tools and resources can we offer to that office, the customer, the office manager, whoever else is in there, that's going to make their job a little bit easier in order to, prescribe our products. So that's one thing definitely we have looked at, and we've added into our classroom training to really make it more specific, so that when the rep goes out there, they're building upon that on the job. And then the other area too is district and regional kind of like roundtable webinars, so that we have our marketing, brand folks on calls periodically, 30-minute calls with some different updates that affect that area. And then we do like a brainstorming session of, what are some of the messages we can share with our customers, and how can we make, prescribing the product hopefully a little bit easier and help them with that process to do that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Dee. Jeff, what about you? What are your sales team's learning priorities for 2017?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so a little different than the polling. So again, I'm with a very tenured sales force. They think they all know how to sell already. So we don't we don't do a whole lot of selling process. All right, we do focus on selling skills a lot, so help them refine skills. But I would say the more prominent needs for my teams, they're in buy and bill markets. Both our neurology sales team and our oncology sales team. And so their understanding of the business environment is most critical to them. And then followed behind that is really around clinical information, current treatment options, and staying current on that. So those are two big challenges. Access is always an issue. And if there was a simple training program that would allow for better access, I'll spend a lot of money on it. We know how hard that is to train. And we approach access issues more around strategic planning and using account planning than we do around training. And so leveraging the account plan to drive access.
So how can training support, the if we call it market selling strategies? Is there is that typically a collaborative approach where training might provide some of the background market training, and then the more detailed account planning is done in the field, or how is that done within the organization?
Well, for Ipsen, I'll give you an example around the oncology care model. So, mid last year, we started hearing, feedback from the regional business directors that their sales professionals, the oncology team, is getting questions about the oncology care model and how leveraging our drug or our product may impact a physician's standing, in the model and, based on utilization. And so, that generated an immediate training opportunity. They didn't ask me to train on it. I just heard them talking about it, and I immediately, understood that that should be a training priority that we need to, satisfy as soon as possible, which we did. And so I think just trying to, again, the business meetings and listening to what your stakeholders are saying, listening to their issues, and then, linking that to a training opportunity is very, very important.
Okay. Now that's great. Thank you very much, Jeff. Okay, let's move on and look at how we keep learners engaged in content. So, Dee, let's start off by asking you, how do you keep your learners engaged in your content?
Yeah, sure. So I think we covered a lot of this actually, but it's really, for us as trainers, rethinking our training approach, because it's very different than if you've been in training for a while than, years ago. So definitely looking at the different roles, right? Number one, the roles. Number two, the skill sets and competencies. Three, getting the buy-in from your senior leadership, why you need to do this training, and really, being cost effective throughout that whole process. And then the ways that we can do that, you guys can see on the slide here, is through those podcasts and webinars, roundtable webinars, using, the Adobe Connect or the WebEx, and doing the pollings and the breakout rooms that way. And then I always say, the mentoring of each other is also a great way to really have the reps learn from each other, because they want to hear from each other. So if you can pair some of them up, newer folks with somebody that's a little more seasoned, and they can have a call and, just talk through some of the challenges that they're hearing out there in the field in the marketplace, and, how do other people address those, and what does that sound like? What tools and resources do you show? That could be helpful as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that, Dee. Jeff, how about you? How do you keep learners engaged at Ipsen?
Yeah, I mean, so thanks, Michelle. Our primary approach is around group learning, and especially around team learning. And so, we launched a specialty certification program this year, and the teams are required to go through about 75% of that program as a team. So the program consists of required courses plus elective courses that the learners can pick from a menu. But for the required courses, we ask that teams go through that coursework together, and they have a planned and they have a scheduled approach to doing that. So we combine the online self-directed learning with a monthly team conference call where a person on the team has to lead a discussion for that learning object, and we have people trade that responsibility every month. So all the learners have a chance to teach a program, and of course everybody has to stay on a cadence to be current with the conference calls that we have on a monthly basis. And those are different at the region level. We also leverage the same approach for new hire training. Going back to the virtual classroom, we set calendar marks for when we'll have our virtual sessions, and they have to have specific parts of the training completed by that session. So it keeps them, it keeps them on cadence, and then when they come into the group learning environment, everybody's on the same page. The second thing we do is we try to keep our learning in manageable chunks, I guess, or in manageable pieces. We have not gone to micro learning yet, where you have the short 2, 3, 4 minute learning opportunities. But anything, we have a lot of 10 to 12 minute learning objects and learning content, especially KOL videos. But we haven't gone quite to the micro learning environment just yet.
Okay, great.
I do have a quick
great.
comment on something. I'm just thinking about what Jeff just said. So Jeff, great point. Talking a little bit about, kind of like the electives that the team gets to do. I think that's, we actually just started that this year. Last year, in our Leadership Development 101 and 201 programs, it was more of, here's your learning plan and this is what you need to complete. This year we moved into more of that approach. And so there's, common courses that people are taking, and then there are electives, and then, those, teaching sessions that the reps are doing with the other representatives. And definitely well worth looking at in your different training plans that you're doing, because we've found the same thing, that a lot of success, people like to be able to learn about something they're interested in also. So the electives was a really good idea. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff, because I didn't think of that at the time.
Thanks, Dee. And then also you'll see on the screen that under group learning, I mentioned the key opinion leader videos we leverage quite a bit in our training. And this combines a lot of the elements we've talked about on this session. So to keep my learners current on the clinical environment, I leverage a lot of the content that's on the oncology CME sites. And OncLive is a good example of that. And in many cases, we can leverage a lot of the videos that are published on OncLive for our disease state. I have a very flexible review committee that allows us to do that. And you combine those short 10 to 12 minute videos that are free, okay, as long as you play them off the CME website, and you combine that with a monthly team discussion on what that key opinion leader is saying, you have a great environment for group learning.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both very much. Okay, so before we move on to the fourth strategy for keeping your team's market ready, let's ask one more question. What is the most effective way to measure ROI from training programs? So pick A if you think the most effective way to measure ROI is employee retention or turnover. Pick B if you think it's field productivity. Pick C if you think it's promotions. Pick D if you think it's learner surveys. So please make your selection now, and then we'll discuss the results.
Thanks, Michelle. And again, everybody's voting very quickly. Let me ask everyone to wrap up their vote here quickly, and we'll keep the program moving forward. I'll also mention that we are moving toward the end of the hour, so if you have any questions for any of our speakers, after the poll will be a great time to type some of those in.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. And let me go ahead and close off the poll at this point. Everybody, thanks for sharing. And Michelle, we can look at the results now. Here you go.
Okay, field productivity. Okay, very interesting. All right, so let's talk about that fourth strategy, reviewing key metrics to determine ROI. So I think most of you are familiar with the Kirkpatrick model, and where you kind of start at the bottom with the smiley face, the reaction, satisfaction, moving on to learner impact, measuring skills and knowledge gains, and then moving up the pyramid to application and implementation. So that can measure things like changes in on-the-job application, behavior change, or implementation, for example. And then finally, the levels 4 and 5, the business impact, where you truly are measuring the monetary value of the business outcomes with the cost of training program, of the training program. We all know that that those final four, those levels 4 and 5, can be the most difficult to measure, but that's also an area where training can demonstrate its value to the organization as a revenue center rather than a cost center. So, Dee or Jeff, I was hoping that, do you have any examples where you've been able to measure level 4 or 5 training at your organization? Maybe we could start, Jeff, with you.
Well, I mean, I clearly, from your poll, I guess the most the most direct line of ROI is around field sales, either the sales impact or productivity, things like that. But I also think it's important to focus on retention and turnover. It's harder to measure unless you do it through surveys. I mean, people come to organizations, they want to be developed, and they want to have opportunities to be developed. So we can't just cap that just because we can't measure it, all right, even though it's difficult to measure. But I do think that ROI and especially the level 4 area and level 5 areas, that you have to pick those opportunities when they become available. My best example is at my last organization, we had a huge cross-training initiative for our diabetes sales team. It was on a $4 billion product, so you can measure ROI on that pretty well. And we did it through the virtual environment, so it was simple to show the cost savings of not, of course, flying 1,000 people somewhere for a 5-day meeting versus running that session online. And then, of course, you can show the change in direction of the sales momentum based on the timing of the training. So we have to pick those opportunities when we have them and make sure we can tie it back what we did in training to our training efforts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dee, how about you? What are some ways that you measure the ROI of your training programs?
Yeah, and I think Jeff really hit that one super. So, yeah, just I think by doing some of these virtual trainings versus the classroom, and then being able to take a look at when the representative is out in the field, you know, are they more efficient maybe in their routing? Have their sales calls, the dialogue, has that increased? Have they been able to get further along with that conversation with somebody in the office? So looking at those areas as well, and then what were the savings on the virtual training versus bringing them in for 4 days? Maybe you chunked out the virtual training, you know, over a course of, you know, 2 weeks. So people were in the field, and then they came in to do, you know, came on the phone or the webinar to do that learning. And I think part of the other thing too is, you know, how do you ensure that this learning even transfers then back out into the field? And so one way that we've done it, and maybe this is like old school, but it's called the transfer matrix, and it's really just looking at, you know, you as the trainer, the district manager, and then that person being trained, and looking at the 3 time periods. So, you know, the before, during, and then after, and the role of each of those people, the manager, trainer, and trainee, and what the expectations are for those 3 roles before, what do we expect during, and then, you know, what are the expectations after? Because if we don't pull that through in those 3 periods, we're going to lose the ability to look at some of that ROI.
Good point. Good point. Okay. Well, Tim, I know we're getting close to the end of our hour. Do we have time for one audience question?
Thanks, Michelle. I think we do. Folks, if you do have any questions, we maybe squeeze 2 in if you hurry. So if you do have any questions, send those on. And I do have one question queued up here, Michelle, and this is aimed at Dee, but I'd love to Jeff's thoughts as well. How does learning relate to career development programs in your organization?
Yeah. So at Alamo Pharma, we have a career, you know, ladder program. And within the ladder program, each level is really assigned different coursework and requirements based on the competencies and behaviors. And some of that coursework is off the shelf from, you know, CMR, from Skillsoft. And then we have on-the-job coursework that will pull through with the rep and the manager as well. And as, you know, the representative completes that, then they'll move into that next ladder. And then also through our leadership development programs, the 101 and 201, we have the coursework built in, again, from CMR, Skillsoft. Executive book summaries is another good area that you can pull some, you know, industry-type articles and assign those as well, and then do some panel discussions with the team on those. And throughout the career development programs and then the leadership develop, just to kind of keep the folks engaged and excited about it, they can earn different badges. So as they move from one level to another, and then maybe when you go to a national sales meeting, they kind of wear their badge on there of what level they're in, what program they've gone to, and that can also build some excitement around the programs as well. Does that answer your the question, I hope?
I think it did. Thank you,
Sure.
Dee.
I think it did. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, Tim, it looks like we're right up on the top of the hour. So I guess what I would ask is that if panelists have, or if the audience has specific questions for the panelists, that they could reach out directly to them, to the emails on the screen, and hopefully the panelists will get right back with you.
Thanks, Michelle. And let's also remind everybody that in the handouts window on the control panel is a worksheet. Michelle, you might want to tell people about that.
Yes.
Worksheet.
Yes. So I hope everyone will download. We do have a best practice worksheet for trainers to go through to identify ways that you can implement some of the strategies that we've spoken to today. So I encourage you to download that worksheet as well.
Excellent, thank you. Well, with all of that said, let me send out some final thank yous to our Michelle for a nice job moderating today, and our panelists, Dee Followan and Jeff Taylor. Dee and Jeff and Michelle, great job for all three of you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us today. We appreciate it.
Lots of fun, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
There you go. And speaking of a lot of fun, folks, let me invite you all to join us if you haven't already planned to for the 46th L10 Annual Conference coming up June 5th to 8th, 2017 at Gaylord Opryland. I know Michelle's going to be there. I hope Dee and Jeff are able to join us as well.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a great show. There you go. Excellent. Always. There you go. Thanks. It's always good to see you guys there as well. And, you can find out more information about the conference at l10conference.com. I also mentioned briefly our e-learning lounge is now open, and during the webinar we talked a little bit about the importance of macro learning and sort of a segmented learning, and that's what we've put together here with the e-learning lounge, 14 micro lessons on every aspect of life sciences learning and development. You can visit the l-10.org website to find out more information on the e-learning lounge, which is now available. And finally, I wanted to invite you all to join us for our next webinars. We'll be back on April 20th, next Thursday, a week from this Thursday, actually. 6 Disruptive Trends Redefining Virtual Learning. They'll be held on the On24 platform. So if you haven't experienced that platform, it's a chance to experience a different webinar platform as well. We typically use GoToWebinar. Nice to always see how other programs and platforms work. And then on Wednesday, April 26th, we'll be talking about the LMS is dead. And you can find out more information about these programs at l-10.org/webinars and register. For those who've asked about today's program, it has been recorded and will be archived shortly to l-10.org/webinar archives. And we're going to send you an email in just about 1 hour connecting you to that recording. If you have any questions about any of this, you can always reach out to me at the email address showing here on the screen. With that said, I'm going to send a final thank you to our panelists, and I'm also going to send a thank you to our sponsor today, CMR Institute, and mostly I'm going to thank you out there in the audience for your time, attention, and participation throughout today's program. Enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Tim. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tim. Bye.
Bye-bye.